Hey, thanks for checking out The Solid Verbal. Now would be a great time to subscribe to the channel for college football content all off season long.
Welcome back to The Solid Verbal. Boys and girls, my name is Ty Hildebrand. His name is always the illustrious, the incomparable Dan Rubenstein, heart of the Midwest, Chicago, Illinois. Stopped at 5-all in the third set of his tennis match last night.
Yeah, we got kicked off the court at 10 p.m. It happens.
Got kicked off the court at 10 p.m. Nonetheless, this is a football show. Dan, and how are you today? Good to have you back.
I'm good. I really like the theme. If I can pat myself on the back for a second, I really like the theme for this series of episodes. Because to me, and I've said this before, life is about accomplishments, right? Mini accomplishments, medium-sized accomplishments, major accomplishments. And even though we're not doing a what'll it take for this team or that team to get bowl eligible or get to 4 wins or whatever, get to respectability, I like benchmarks, right? That, okay, I'm not going to dunk, I'm going to tap backboard, right? I like benchmarks on a pathway to success. And so, again, it's springtime, the sun is out, I'm ready to have a positive outlook because that's what this time is for, Ty. Come on.
If we're lucky, other college football podcasts will borrow this concept as well. We've had a little bit of that lately.
Salty Ty.
Look, no. We like all these people.
His voice
These
going
are all
up.
friends.
Sure.
I'm just saying. We're the idea engine of the college football podcastosphere.
I like
Fair
this.
to say, yeah?
I can't argue it. Sure.
On today's show, we are talking news, a few news tidbits that we thought y'all might be interested in. We are also going to go into that theme that Dan just mentioned. We're going to talk through what it's going to take for some teams, Arkansas, Missouri, and West Virginia, to get to that next tier, which we've defined as 8 wins, a comfortable 8 wins year in and year out. We've got a guest, Chris Anderson from EerSports.com, who's going to help us break things down in a little bit more detail on the West Virginia side. But beyond that, Dan has taken Arkansas. I've taken Mizzou. I feel like we are relatively well informed about what it's going to take for each of those programs to get to that next stage. And then, of course, for any other bonus content, you can go on out to verballers.com. You can get early access to this episode, all of our episodes that we do. Also get access to our Discord, which is teeming with college football life, despite the fact that it is the cold months of the college football off season. Going out to our website, solidverbal.com, for all of our past episodes. And if you are listening out there on your podcasting app of choice, of course, it always helps to hit subscribe or follow and leave a 5-star rating or a flowery review if you are ever so inclined.
I casually mentioned to my wife, Jody with an I, that, 16 weeks out till the first college football Saturday, the first college football weekend. It was something like that. And the guttural sound that emitted from her soul. One, she loves college football, right? She went to Michigan. She loved going to Michigan games. She loves, the sort of Big Ten spirit that's alive and well in the Midwest. She loves that. But the idea of me being, working 7 days a week and busy from, sun up to sundown every Saturday and maybe part of Sunday, we'll see. It was just which is how I know we're getting closer.
Yeah, we are turning that corner as we get into the middle of May. Shall we dive in?
Yeah.
I can't do the breaking news. There's not a whole lot of news to break. It is mid-May.
Yeah.
That is just the way that this normal rhythm of college football offseason tends to go. But we have a few things, 3 things that I wanted to bring to the Verballerhood's attention. The first thing is this. Have you followed the Iowa State gambling story at all, Dan?
A little bit, yeah, and it's one of a few that's ongoing right now because we had the Alabama baseball coach. We've had notices around the sport and around athletic departments that yes, there are more binoculars and more eyeballs on the activities of athletes and coaches and people within athletic departments as it relates to legalized gambling.
So I bring this up not because there's any kind of great smoking gun or any juicy notices of allegation or even criminality. Mm-hmm. I think we're very early on in this story, but you may have read about it. I wanted to bring it up on the show. What the, top level bullet point is that Iowa and Iowa State are investigating 126 people for gambling. Now, gambling is legal in Iowa. but athletes aren't allowed to do it. That's part of the deal. Athletes can't bet. It sounds like only a small percentage of those 126 are current athletes.
Okay.
So keep that in mind. A very small number of them are actually currently athletes. However, I think it's worth bringing this up just because we're going to see more of this. I think it's inevitable we're going to see more of this.
Right.
86% of betting is done online or through a mobile app, and that makes it damn near impossible to police. So to say that this is going on at Iowa but nowhere else is probably putting your head in the sand. My hunch is that in due time, we'll hear much more about this at other places around college athletics. It is not limited just to college football.
Yes.
But as the presence of gambling continues to increase, not just in college football, but in sports in general here in North America, you can expect to hear more stories like this. For what it's worth, I haven't seen more updates out there on the Iowa and Iowa State side, just that they were working hand in glove with the NCAA to try and figure out exactly what's going on and what they need to do about it. So stay tuned to it. Be aware of it.
Right.
I don't know if it's necessarily a meteor headed towards Iowa or Iowa State or college sports as a whole, but it is notable.
Yeah, and one of the things, and I think I saw it from Dan Wetzel, one of the things that's interesting about these types of stories is as the legalization of sports gambling sweeps across, it's a state decision, many more states, recently than there were before, is with increased amount of legalized gambling comes increased scrutiny, right? That there's more oversight. There are more eyeballs saying, oh, this is a weird thing that's happening, that because everything is above board, right? That it's just legal to gamble on sports in a number of places, that it's easier to catch suspicious dealings like what we're seeing in a couple of places. And so that's fascinating to me. And, for somebody who loves the romance of the sport, you really hope that everything is kept clean and kosher. But yeah, you almost have to worry a little bit more about, and I think I want to credit where credit's due. I think it was Matt Brown talking about mid-major type basketball stuff. That's where a lot of huge scandals have happened with point shaving and stuff like that. And there's just less eyeballs on that. That's where it becomes a little bit murkier, I suppose. But yeah, interesting to follow the Iowa and Iowa State stuff. And let me be clear. I'm not making an accusation, Ty. I am just theorizing here. You know the sports gambling universe better than I do. If you were to say, yeah, Dan, I hit on 75% of my bets this year, that's full on incredible, yes?
Yeah. Oh, my God, yeah.
Iowa games, 70% last year, hit the under. Iowa State games, 75% hit the under.
I saw some conspiracy theories floating
We live
around.
in a world, again,
Yeah.
I am accusing nobody of anything. I'm not accusing anybody of anything.
Boy,
That's probably better English.
Wouldn't that be an out for Brian Ferentz?
Well, yeah, that his players were the one tanking, that, the offense
Don't
was
blame me, blame them.
Yeah, they're all driving around in crazy Teslas and Rivians and Lamborghinis, whatever. Oh, weird. That NIL just came through, I guess.
Yeah. Brian over here is driving a Honda Accord.
Let me be clear. Zero founded accusations on my part. But I did look up those numbers that, look, we live in a world of coincidences. And it's very easy to imagine that Iowa and Iowa State were just inept on offense last year and hit 75% of their unders, which is, again, pretty impressive if you're betting. But no, hope everything is cleared, because it's not a black eye college football needs right now.
Elsewhere, Oklahoma and Texas made it Facebook official, Dan, that they're taking the final step in moving to the SEC, of course, starting next season, July 1st, 2024 to be exact. The Board of Regents at Texas and then Oklahoma very quickly signed on to give approval to sign the paperwork. Look, it was more of a formality.
Yeah.
Again, it's May. We have a limited number of things that we could really, truly bring your attention in the news tidbit of this show, but it is worth mentioning that it is official. It's going to happen. Oklahoma and Texas to the SEC starting in 2024.
No, it's also fascinating. It's a fascinating time portal-wise as well, because this is the final, off-season, spring off-season portal window. Who knows what's going to happen? But you get a little bit more insight into, you can say, oh, Notre Dame secondary is not great, or Alabama secondary is not great, or Oregon's receiving core needs some help. And that's your opinion. But then if Marcus Freeman, Dan Lanning are like, we need another offensive lineman after spring ball. We need another receiver after spring ball. You get a little bit of indicators where the coaches think the roster is at after spring practice and seeing what they have or they don't have. I just saw Alabama just got the Louisiana corner, I want to say.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
A lot of rosters having their I's dotted and T's crossed, whatever, in hopes of summer workouts and fall camp going well. So, fascinating stuff to pay attention to, that this is the sort of last spring chance anyway, spring-summer chance to see rosters improved upon.
And finally, I may have given away the game a little bit here on the last episode, but nonetheless, you may have heard that DraftKings released win totals for the upcoming 2023 season. We, of course, will go into more detail on the free newsletter, which you can subscribe at solidverbal.com or quickslants.solidverbal.com. Either one will work. Send that out every Thursday for free. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And you and I will go into much, much more detail on this as we push into June and July, when we have more info on who is playing where and where transfers end up and the like. But for our purposes here, we should just quickly mention Oregon is a 9.5 win, over under. Notre Dame is at 9.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, it's Oregon and USC at the top of the Pac-12, right? 9.5.
Yes.
Yeah, that's an interesting number. We actually just did a podcast. I'll plug him because I think he's a great guy, with Tim Murray at VSIN.
Yep.
Is that how it's VSIN?
I got that wrong for the longest
time.
Yeah,
it's just VSIN. So we just go over and find his podcast. It's a college football betting podcast, I believe. We will do a bunch of over-under schedule type previews in the coming weeks. But yeah, fascinating to look at where Vegas, is appraising a lot of these programs that we're going to talk about right here in the context of win numbers.
How about that? Let's play the step-by-step. Give me the step-by-step thing again. How do you feel when you hear that theme song? Does it bring you back?
Can I tell you? And I want to get into college football, I promise. I realized all of 2 days ago when I found that song that the name of the show, Step by Step, was, related to and relative to step siblings on that show.
Really?
Well, right. Do you remember the concept behind Step by Step? It's like a new Brady Bunchy thing, like that a dad with 3 kids marries a mom with 3 kids. And it's the coming together of step siblings.
I never put that together.
I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that's intentional.
I'm sure it was.
But the whole dynamic of the show is step siblings getting to know each other and figuring out the dynamics.
Elementary school, junior high, middle school age tie, never put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's why it's called that. But maybe I'm just reaching. Who knows?
My wife, I played that clip for her. She said it gave her bad vibes. I don't know.
Really?
I don't think she was against Step by Step. I just think a sudden transport back to one's childhood can sometimes be a little traumatic.
Oh my God, Suzanne Summers.
Yeah.
You're talking about Christine Lakin as Al?
Yeah.
Formative for me. All right, you want to start Arkansas? You want to start Mizzou? It's your choice.
I want to start Arkansas.
Okay.
You did the Arkansas breakdown. I did Mizzou. Again, the purpose of this here is to figure out how teams can get to 8 wins.
Yeah.
Next week, we're going to do 10. But Arkansas, I think, is in a really interesting spot. We're actually doing 2 SEC teams, 2 rival SEC teams, the Battle Line rivalry, Arkansas and Mizzou. Arkansas, I feel like, is probably easier to diagnose than Mizzou, but I want to hear it from you.
So I've been on the record with this, that Arkansas is college football. The chaotic nature of Arkansas's recent and overall history, and the star power and the teams that they play, the major teams that they play. I just think the most college football team is the Arkansas Razorbacks. So I'm thrilled to talk about them as they hope to just find more consistency, because the best of Arkansas the past decade or so has been sensational. The best of Bobby Petrino with all those receivers. Ty, what do you know about Greg Childs?
Oh, yeah.
What do you know about Jarius Wright?
Yeah.
Right? What do you know about, what's his name?
I loved Jarius Wright.
Sure. So they have all these guys on both sides of the ball. They have star power there, right? Tyler Wilson at quarterback, Ryan Mallett, and now they have more star power at quarterback now. And he's been the starter the past couple of years, and KJ Jefferson. Arkansas, to me, big picture, is a program that is capable of winning a bunch of games when they are approaching things with a very specific vision. It doesn't necessarily mean system, but that has helped, right? The best of, the Bobby Petrino era is airing the ball out with big armed quarterbacks and, recruiting to a system, finding those receivers and succeeding. The more recent, the more micro is, and this is the least groundbreaking thing I could possibly say, when Arkansas has a defense, they win. When Arkansas has a defense, they win. And so even with those high-flying teams way back when, the defense is pretty good. The other thing that is pretty crucial, just in terms of Arkansas being in that 7, 8, 9 win range and going to a pretty good bowl game, perhaps on New Year's Day, it really helps if one of those teams, one of the other teams in the SEC West is abysmal, right? It helps when 3 teams are pretty disappointing. You look back at, I think it was 2011. You have an incredible Alabama and LSU situation where they played the rerun national championship game and just filled those rosters filled with NFL players.
Yeah.
That's the year after Cam Newton at Auburn. They sink like a stone, right? They become a 500 team after winning the national championship. Mississippi State is pretty bad. Ole Miss and Houston Nutt's 4th season is atrocious. They are extremely bad at football. That helps. That Arkansas is able to pad maybe, and look, Arkansas I think won 11 games that year. They won 11-2. That Arkansas can be an 8 or 9-ish win type team, but they play terrible programs and beat them easily. That helps for a team like Arkansas that doesn't have the slimmest margin for error, right? Location-wise, there's talent in state. They're right there with Texas. They, can recruit in the SEC. I think where Arkansas stands right now, hopefully, is in a pretty good place to get back to that point. Now, I don't see a team in the SEC West as being catastrophically bad, which I think hurts their chances sometimes to get that 8-9 win level, to get to that level. But with how the team is built, with how active the team is in the portal, with the idea that, if nothing else, Sam Pittman is going to recruit and develop offensive linemen. Didn't at all times last year, but they were really promising in 2021. That is, in theory, when I say, how is Arkansas going to win? You are going to say, the hope is, the goal is, the vision is, they're going to bludgeon teams to death up front on offense, right? They are going to wear teams down, and they're going to make smart decisions. Obviously, I think we were both fans at the time of where he went with his coordinators in terms of scheme and, on-field results. Now, changes out both of them in this offseason. Travis Williams coming in from UCF and Dan Enos coming in from, you name it. Dan Enos has been there. I think Arkansas is in a really good place. That said, I am going to go back and I'm going to say it kind of depends on where Auburn is under Hugh Freeze, where Mississippi State goes, where Ole Miss goes, where Texas A&M goes, because Arkansas finds themselves, or at least found themselves last year, in those 50-50 games that come down to 1 to 3 mistakes or 1 to 3 miscalculations that takes away the possibility of them winning 8 games. Whether it's, the catastrophic scoop and score against A&M and coupled with a doink at the end. You look at a lack of aggression or a lack of success in short yardage moments against Mizzou, which I'm sure you'll talk about as well in there. Yeah. I think it was a 2-point loss.
Yep.
Those types of moments have come to define, and you had the weird icy weather game where did the Arkansas grounds crew accidentally water an icy field? Was that a thing that I'm remembering correctly?
That. We talked about that, I think, in one of our fantasy things episodes.
Yeah, it was something, or a year-end recap thing.
One of the all-time great.
Yeah, that was like a 14-12 game where Harold Perkins just filled up the back of a baseball card. That was, so there's those moments where Arkansas seems to, every year, find something incredible. Recently, it's been KJ Jefferson. A couple years ago, Treylon Burks' offensive line, some defensive star power. Last year, it's, Rocket Sanders emerges. Drew Sanders on the other side of the ball emerges as an all-SEC first-team linebacker. But then they can't stop anything else. Then the secondary is awful. Then the offensive line gives up a ton of pressure and sacks in huge moments like they did against Mizzou. That everything hasn't been coming together reasonably well at the same time. And that's when you rely on getting every third down call correct, getting every red zone call correct, and not being able to weather one just randomly awful play like an 82-yard scoop and score like they had against Texas A&M.
That's right.
All in all, I like Arkansas's aggression in the portal. Once again, they've done that, especially along the defensive line and in the secondary. Very much needed after we saw some weaknesses last year. They have 2 apparent quarterbacks of the future after KJ Jefferson exhausts his eligibility. I like seeing that. And I think Sam Pittman's a good recruiter. Right now, I like Sam Pittman and his upside more than I like a number of coaches, even in that same conference or division. I have not waned from my enthusiasm about Sam Pittman. So if you're asking me today, do you see realistically that Arkansas can win 8 games provided they hit on some more 50-50 decisions and moments and, continue to develop guys, continue to be aggressive in the portal? I saw they just brought in, I think, one of the top tight ends in the portal from North Texas. My answer is yes. I think there are more universes than not that if you simulate the next 3 seasons, that they win 8 games. I really am that high on Arkansas because I think Sam Pittman resonates on the trail, resonates in his locker room, and resonates in the assistant hiring world. So I'm just up on Arkansas right now with looking at the division, looking at the conference, and looking at Sam Pittman in general. So that's my takeaway.
And looking at the schedule.
Yeah.
If you look at the schedule, at least in the immediate short term, there's a reason that Vegas set the win total at 7.5. I look at the schedule and I say, well, of course it's going to be tough when you're on the road at LSU and at Alabama,
right,
at Ole Miss, and then home against Texas A&M. By the way, those are games back to back to back to back.
Yeah.
LSU, A&M, Ole Miss, Alabama. That's really, though, the meat of the schedule. The deeper you get into this thing, at Florida, look, nobody wants to play at Florida. It's a very, very loud stadium. But who knows what state that program will be in. Auburn, still in a bit of disarray. I think they'll be improved, but that feels like it could be a winnable game. There's a game against FIU. There's the battle line rivalry to close out the year against Mizzou. We'll talk about Mizzou momentarily. Those are winnable games if you're Arkansas. So I feel pretty bullish about that 7.5.
The difference, the difference is, sorry to interrupt, but I think it's related, is we've had this conversation before about Arkansas. We've had this conversation like last year. They hit the portal hard. We're like, okay, Arkansas is seeing its deficiencies. They were beat up in the secondary the year before that, and I guess 21, and they really were not able to sustain at all on defense over the course of the year. And they bring in like Dwight McGlothern, LSU transfer. They bring in these guys, and there's that like spring summer hope, and you're like, oh well, I guess there's a reason why this guy was in the portal. Oh, I guess this guy couldn't crack it too deep at a similar place. There's a reason, or couldn't get on the field, whatever. It's one thing to say, I like that they've hit the portal, but Arkansas has hit the portal before. And so it's just like, why is this year's Arkansas situation different than last year's Arkansas situation? That's what I'm monitoring right now, coupled with, hey, look, it's a bunch of new receivers once again, and a new offensive coordinator, and just like, how much new can KJ Jefferson take?
Yeah.
That's the concern.
That's right. And they were really bad against pass last year.
Yeah, terrible.
Really bad against the pass last year, and they need to solve that. You can't put it all on KJ Jefferson, on the offense, on whatever, on just one side of the ball. That's not going to work in the SEC and be sustainable if we're talking about sustainably, again, getting to that 8-win plateau. Hopefully not a plateau, but the 8-win level. You need to be a little bit more well-rounded than that.
Agree. Yeah, it would be just like Arkansas to solve defense and have an offense that doesn't make sense this year, and they open up too many games going 3 and out for 3 straight drives and either claw their way back for a comeback win in a shootout type situation. Look, they have I'm still such a KJ Jefferson believer. I think the best of KJ Jefferson is one of the best 5 quarterbacks in the nation. I really am that sold on his raw ability, as a dual threat, as a big-armed guy. I don't know. There's just too much change and chaos, it seems, around him. That's what worries me.
And I think part of what affects Arkansas is also what affects Mizzou, who we can talk about now if you're all out of Arkansas thoughts.
Yeah.
Like the conference is getting better. Everybody around these teams is also improving. And even the teams that you could count on for a win before, like Vanderbilt, not quite the gimme it used to be. Still should be winnable for both of these teams. But it is meaningful that the conference as a whole is getting better. And I think Mizzou is in a really weird spot now, kind of amid all that. Going back last season, it was year 3 under Eli Drinkwitz. They finished 6-7 for the second straight year, went to a bowl but lost. Their two best wins last season were against South Carolina and the aforementioned Arkansas Razorbacks. In the previous 2 seasons under Eli, I talk about Eli as if I know him. I've never met the man
your
in my
guy
life.
Eli.
It's just easier than saying Drinkwitz, so forgive me. But in the previous 2 seasons, we saw that offense improve and the defense get worse, and then catastrophically worse in 2021. So it was a little bit weird to try and figure out which direction the trend lines were pointed, at least on defense. Last season, the trend completely turned on its head, 180 degrees. The offense took a huge step back. The defense improved from 110th in the SP Plus all the way up to 19th.
Wow.
We can save the specifics for our team preview episodes in a few months when we talk about the whys and what it means moving forward. But if the purpose of this is to zoom out a bit, just with that as context, the big overarching existential question, I think, for Mizzou is why Eli Drinkwitz has not translated any of Mizzou's talent into wins or more wins or what feels like a trend of more wins.
Mm-hmm.
It does not feel like he is getting the most out of the roster. And it's complicated to figure out why it almost always is. I don't think there's one reason for it. I don't think we'll be able to solve that riddle on this episode. It's just too nuanced. But what I can do is give you the lay of the land. Bigger picture, there are a few things that I think Eli, again, I know the man personally.
Yeah.
A few things that I think he has done pretty well. For one, he's crazy energetic, and that rubs off, man. Like, Mizzou lost a handful of one-score games against Auburn and Florida and Kentucky and Georgia. Remember, they were in it late against Georgia. You get the feeling that players will fight for this guy, that they're very plucky. And I think that means something, even if the wins aren't there. They haven't given up on him. Meaningful, at least in my view. I also think he's got a real eye for talent, at least on the coaching side. The most recent really good example is what happened with Blake Baker when they hired him at first to be a safeties coach, but then Steve Wilkes left to go back to the NFL, and they just gave Blake Baker the defensive coordinator job. You may recall in his time under Manny Diaz, he was really solid at Miami. And so he came in, he was the architect of the top 20 defense that I mentioned earlier from last season, sort of that aggressive attacking mentality defense that we like to joke about on our fantasy thing shows. We've done it for a few years running, but that's essentially what they did at Mizzou, and it worked really, really well. He has also done, I think, a really good job of recruiting the transfer portal. Mizzou last season, if you've been paying attention, had like 100% hit rate, at least on defenders that came over onto last year's roster. And he continues to be, I think, really aggressive in the portal, making Missouri an attractive portal destination for guys who aren't getting time elsewhere, who might want to come and try their hand in Columbia. That's all the good news. But a couple structural things that we also need to talk about that need to be addressed if they want to get to that next level. I think the first thing is, while the portal recruiting has been solid, the high school recruiting is not. It's left a lot to be desired. And Eli, again, I know him personally, close friend. He has proven that he can reel in some big fish. We've seen that. But he hasn't done it consistently enough.
He's also lost some big fish.
Right?
They lose their number one receiver to Georgia. They lose, was it Trajan Jeffcoat to Arkansas?
So he can do it. He just hasn't done it enough.
Right.
And the talent acquisition bit, you see ever so slightly and more progressively and more dramatically skewing heavily towards the portal, which is very boomer busty.
Right.
You're not going to hit on every guy every year, and that makes the whole thing very risky. Secondly, they are in the midst of a big-time identity crisis on offense, man.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm burying the lead here, mentioning it this late in the discussion. I know the first thing a lot of Missouri fans want to mention is the offense. Eli Drinkwitz came over to Mizzou fashioned as something of an offensive guru.
Sure.
That reputation preceded him. We have not seen that magic in Columbia. Frankly, we don't even know what the philosophy of this offense is supposed to be. Missouri has a good receiver room this season. I don't think they have a good line. I am not frightened by any home run hitters that they may have in the backfield. The quarterback situation. Eli Drinkwitz, close friend, made a comment that if they took the field today, Brady Cook would be the starter. He wasn't horrible last season. He certainly
I liked him at times, but I understand the frustration.
He can run, but he was very average and he had injury issues.
Yeah.
And so Missouri fans heard that, and rightfully, they want to scream because Jake Garcia transferred up from Miami. Who knows what you get out of him, but it's somebody else. It's another warm body. Or Sam Horn is still on the team.
Mm-hmm.
He might have better tools than either of the other two guys. That comment did not go over well in Missouri circles. And I think it just speaks to this larger identity crisis that the Tigers presently have on offense. And they did hire Kirby Moore to run the offense away from Fresno. He's done a good job at Fresno. I think it'll be interesting to see if he can create an identity on offense in the way that Blake Baker did on the defensive side. But that's a problem right now for Missouri, trying to establish what they are. And most importantly, amid all of this is an SEC schedule, man. It's the SEC. I said this before. All of the teams that they are playing are getting better. The schedule is constantly getting harder every time you look. Everyone, including Vandy. Again, I come back to Vandy. Mm-hmm. They're getting better. And plus, Texas and Oklahoma are going to come into the league next year. So unless Missouri can somehow break the cycle and start developing guys more consistently, recruiting at the high school level more consistently, that 8-win thing just ain't going to happen. It's not going to happen. Programs like this, like Missouri, are built progressively and on top of previous successes.
Yeah.
Even if you flash 1 year, if you really want to build this thing so that it gets to a comfortable level year in, year out, it needs to be progressively done. If you want to create that flywheel that kind of recruits the program to others and, makes it a transfer more of a transfer destination and more of a destination for top high school talent, you have to have something to show for it. You have to recruit on a body of work. And right now it feels like that's very spotty. And like with what we've seen, the turnaround story probably won't happen. And getting to 8 wins consistently is going to be a bit of a pipe dream. So I'm not very bullish on Mizzou's chances, even though I really do like Eli Drinkwitz, close personal friend.
It's all offense. They scored 25 points a game last year. And like literally, if they hit the bare minimum of 25 a game, not an average, every game 25 exactly, they're winning 3 more games, right? They're beating Florida, they're beating Auburn, I think they're beating Kentucky, right? If I'm reading this correctly. It's not a ton to ask. And I understand the frustration with Brady Cook. Obviously, Eli Drinkwitz and the offensive staff, they're the ones at practice, right? If Sam Horn and Jake Garcia can't stop throwing interceptions in practice, what are you supposed to do if you're Eli Drinkwitz, right? Yeah. Again, I'm making this up, but I'm positive Eli Drinkwitz wants to start the best possible quarterback to win 8, 9, 10 games.
Yeah, and look, the Brady Cook comment, I understand. If I were a Missouri fan, I would have reacted similarly.
Right.
Because it wasn't a great year last year, and he was hurt, but he can run. I mean, he's got that. But I would have reacted in the same way. I don't know if, what is it, spring football comments? I don't know if you could take any of those literally.
Right.
There is an aspect of any of these April, May comments where you're trying to keep guys from transferring because you don't want to lose depth. And at a place like Mizzou, like many other schools that have a similar problem, depth is a thing. It's a concern, especially in this portal era. So I don't know if that should be taken on its face, at face value. I think there's a pretty good chance that it's still somebody else who gets the snaps at quarterback. But at least when Eli, close personal friend, made those comments, didn't want to lose Brady Cook to the portal.
Also, to be fair to Mizzou, staggeringly unlucky with the end of the Auburn and Kentucky games last year.
Sure.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
It's, again, if you're a believer in the universe evening itself out over time, that Mizzou will have very plain wins and losses this year because of how crazy the ends of Mizzou games were. Now, you can also say it's on the head coach to put a team in a position to be prepared for the end of game situations or to not even have to deal with end of game situations because the offense is humming along in a more competent way. But yeah, it was, especially those two games, Auburn and Kentucky, and Florida was winnable for sure. That you're just like, man, if it's all a reflection of Eli Drinkwitz, right? If he's prepared, everybody's prepared. If that's a big priority, even still, those games were bonkers. And so if we're talking about gusts of wind and the moon in a different position, we're talking about a Mizzou team that has won a couple more games. But man, it's a tough way to watch a team that fielded a defense like they did last year. That was the primary reason why they won the games that they did. Just completely spaz out with, 93 seconds left repeatedly.
Yeah. But there were games like the one against Georgia, which they were in,
sure,
I think, against all odds. And I think we've seen time and again that the players are willing to play for this guy.
Sure.
If at some point that changes, then this conversation changes in a big way.
But that's not... Sorry, continue.
I was going to say, then we're talking about a new coach.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily a strategy. It's a good starting point.
Yeah.
I think the offensive identity is certainly the biggest thing that can be corrected, and Kirby Moore's got his work cut out for him on that side of things. But the bigger issue at hand here is the recruiting piece. If you really want to get to a healthy level and sustain it, a talent acquisition model that doesn't require you to do a ton of work and figure out who in the portal might want to come to Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
Bigger picture, that's kind of the long-term model that you want to try and find.
I agree. And again, you lose close before you win close, and this is Mizzou's win close year. It has to be. Yeah.
I hope so. We'll see. Like I said, I got real questions about offense, but maybe more will come in and change things around.
Sure.
It is disappointing that Eli Drinkwitz did not flash as like the offensive wizard that we thought he might be. That's a little disappointing, but we'll see. We'll see. Maybe working with somebody else will help. That's it for Arkansas, Mizzou. Write in, solvable@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts on both of those schools. Let us know in comments.
So are you a believer? Are you a believer in Mizzou in the way that the SEC East is currently constituted and appears to be constituted, that they can get to 8?
No, I'm not.
And you're adding in 2 quality teams, right?
Not
Oklahoma,
consistently.
Texas.
The over-under this year is 6.5. And I could see a very easy scenario in which they get to 7, they get to 8 this year. I think that's totally plausible. But in terms of ongoing, continuing 8 wins, no, not with this recruiting model. The recruiting model they've got in place right now is not going to get them there and keep them there.
And you figure they're probably going to be in some sort of pod with Oklahoma and Texas, just geographically, and given those teams' history with one another in the Big 12. You figure that's going to be added to their schedule more often than not, whether or not they're in the same little cluster or not. So it just, it seems uphill for Mizzou, but this is also a place that has, at least in the last 20, 25 years, I mean, you're talking about the Gary Pinkel era, like they had a specific vision on offense. They won a ton of games. They developed a ton of good players on both sides of the ball. This is not an underdog place.
It's not an underdog place.
They've won the East a couple times.
It's not an underdog story. It isn't. But I do think they are in a very weird spot because the rest of the conference is getting so much better. And because of the transfer portal, even though they've been aggressive in the portal and done a good job, it's just really hard to build any kind of sustainable thing based on 1-year contracts, essentially.
Yeah.
It's really hard to do. And they've done well with it so far. Maybe they'll continue. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I don't like those odds.
All right. Fair enough.
All right, Dan, joining us now to help break down all things West Virginia and Neal Brown, and hopefully getting to that 8-win echelon, Chris Anderson.
Return.
Yeah, the return to 8 wins. Chris Anderson of EerSports.com joining us on a very busy day in West Virginia sports. Chris, we really appreciate your time. How you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Sure. So look, West Virginia 5-7 last season. The year before 6-7. The year before 6-4. The year before 5-7. Year 5 now of Neal Brown. Definitely sensing a 5 or 6 win trend. And I'm just wondering from your insider point of view, if what we feel on the outside is also accurate in that it feels like kind of stuck in neutral, treading water, wondering from afar, like, is this thing going somewhere? Is this thing just going to remain in perpetuity in neutral? Is that an accurate way to characterize where the program is at?
I would say extremely accurate. I think being stuck in neutral, that's a thing. And I think that's what a lot of fans were upset about, with kind of the indecision about what to do with the head coaching situation toward the end of last year. Because again, it was one of those where, and I wrote about it at the time, I said the university has to either fully embrace and get behind Neal Brown, take the approach of he's our guy, tough luck this past year. Let's dump some money into the trust for NIL, all that stuff, or they need to just move on. And they kind of chose between the two, which was kind of a disaster, at least as far as the fan base is concerned. Made the change at athletic director. They have attempted to this offseason, put more money into that NIL situation. The school has embraced the Country Roads Trust. They are working in tandem per NCAA rules, whatever those are nowadays. And West Virginia has done better in the portal and in retaining players from going to the portal than they did last year. So I don't want to go so far as to say hope, but maybe a glimmer there.
Yeah, we talked earlier in this episode about Missouri, and Missouri, at time of recording anyway, has a bit of an identity crisis in that high school recruiting hasn't been ideal. They've done well in the portal, but it's hard to build any kind of sustainable model based solely on the transfer portal. And I wonder if the same type of problem applies on the West Virginia side. It's not apples to apples, but it is really hard to build a sustainable thing when you're constantly having to go to the portal and you're constantly having to hit on guys to be successful in terms of wins and losses, be successful in terms of trying to mold something that you can sell to recruits who might want to come to your school. And so because of that, it feels hard to envision like any kind of sudden turnaround story. Is that also accurate with what's going on at West Virginia? Is that similar enough to what we see at Mizzou, or how do you kind of break that down?
Yeah, I think their acquisition has been very good to very good. They missed on some transfers early on. Obviously, you put a lot of eggs in the JT Daniels basket last year. Started off well enough and then kind of fell off a cliff. But their problem, as far as the big picture over the Neal Brown era, the last 4 years, has been more about retention than acquisition, because they have brought in some nice pickups via high school recruiting or junior college recruiting, and those players have done well and they've developed. But as soon as they're kind of reaching this point of, hey, this guy could be the guy next year, they transfer somewhere else. Look at Akeem Messidor going to Miami, Tyke Smith going to Georgia, Jordan Jefferson this past offseason, unfortunately for West Virginia, leaving for LSU. It's almost like, and God, to the West Virginia fans listening to this, please do not freak out. It's almost like WVU is being treated as a farm system for some of these more blue blood programs. And I think retention of the talent that they bring in is more important right now, or the bigger problem, than it is acquisition in the first place.
Do you have a theory as to why that's been difficult? West Virginia is a major college football program who's played in huge games against big teams in big spots, have been in major conferences, and have had major head coaches. What is it about what's happening inside the walls at West Virginia that makes it difficult to develop and then retain?
I think some of it is the money. I think it was the money, and that was a big issue, because you look at what they said and did with Shane Lyons, the former athletic director. Now, Lyons came out and admitted much. There was that gray area about what the school and the team can and cannot do with NIL and with the Country Roads Trust, and he played it safe. While 90% of the country was going, hey, let's go hand in hand and do this together, Shane Lyons played it safe and kind of backed off and wouldn't put the full support behind that program or a partnership, which I believe set West Virginia back money-wise. I mean, I've heard of numbers being thrown out for some players that left that are, I'm going to use the term modest, but that is relative to the world of college football, not everyday life. But West Virginia just couldn't match it, couldn't top it. And now those same numbers are reasonable. Those are the numbers that you're hearing from other people that West Virginia is now paying, and they can't match it. So I think West Virginia is now competitive in the NIL market. They are by no means going to be one of the top, 10 or 20 teams as far as money being thrown about, but they can be competitive, selectively competitive, on guys they want to keep on this team.
Is that sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy that they're unable to fully aggressively raise money because the wins aren't there, and the wins aren't there because the roster isn't necessarily as deep year over year as it should be? Is that the sort of issue at the moment, that West Virginia maybe win more of those 50-50 games, more of those winnable games, and suddenly, the coffers are a little bit more filled up?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all the chicken and the egg with all this stuff, and it came down to that's the same discussion about the future with Neal Brown. Do you keep him or do you fire him and you're out 16 to 20 million dollars? But the problem is you're claiming you don't have the money to recruit guys. So if you fire the coach and spend $20 million, then now you're out of money that way. So which way is the way to go? Which way is the best way to raise money? And right now they're saying, hey, just trust us.
Right.
Donate, trust us. Let's make it happen.
They're putting a lot of trust in Chad Scott this year with the offense. I want to get back to the identity thing that I brought up before. What is the identity that they're selling to recruits? I guess the optimistic view on where things go, at least offensively, this coming season is that West Virginia is strong up front along the line. They've got a lot back. The running back room it's a stable of guys who are productive or can be productive, provided they steer more into that side of things, that philosophy on offense. How much faith, how much trust are you putting in a new direction, let's call it, on offense under Chad Scott?
I think this may be the year, despite all the returning, like you said, all five guys who ended the year as starters on the offensive line are back. A stable of running backs. I mean, Tony Mathis began last year as a starter. I'm told when spring football ended, he was essentially told, hey, you're going to be third maybe on the depth chart. And that's why he transferred. And there's no hard feelings about that. And West Virginia fans didn't even really sweat it just because of everything coming back in that room. But what is this offense? It's a great question. And I don't think we have answers, because even though it's the same coaching staff, I know Graham Harrell's gone, but Chad Scott was already on the staff and has been there the entire Neal Brown era. Neal Brown, obviously there, both involved. Sean Reagan's going to be involved. He's been there the whole time. So all three of those coaches who are going to be predominantly involved in the identity of this offense and the play calling, which is a whole other discussion, have been there the whole time. So how is it going to be different? They're pitching it that it's going to be different than the last few years because offense has been the struggle, and they're saying it's because of personnel that it's going to be different with a running quarterback, more read option, and more run centric than you've seen in the past couple of years.
Is there an idea that because of the flux that's happening within the conference with Texas, Oklahoma leaving, and now 4 new teams coming in, is there a sense within West Virginia that, not that we can start over, but that we're sort of starting at a new point where we can sort of throw out the past few years because it's a new look of a conference? Or is everything sort of seen as a continuation?
I do think there's a little bit of that view, at least with recruiting and, again, talent acquisition, if you will, because there was never going to become a point where West Virginia was recruiting at the same level as Oklahoma or Texas. I mean, to get to that would take literal decades, changes in geography and everything. So it's just not going to happen. But with those two teams out, now you look at the rest of the league, if you're West Virginia, and you say, hey, yeah, some of these teams are in more talent-rich areas for recruiting. Some of them have a little more history. Some of them have recruited well, but we can do it. We can be the top team as far as recruiting and transfer additions out of what's left after Texas and Oklahoma go. It is possible, at least some years. So I do think they're looking at it through that lens as far as the departure of Texas and Oklahoma.
How has geographic recruiting changed, if at all, since Dana Holgorsen left? Obviously, West Virginia with a ton of success in the state of Florida, and they find a ton of skill position talent, NFL-level skill position talent. Has that adjusted? Has that changed? Has that continued? Because that was obviously an incredibly fruitful pipeline.
I think they're still hitting the same areas. They ventured out into Texas when they first made the move to the Big 12, and it became pretty evident pretty fast. Hey, it's just not going to work out to put too much resources into recruiting that area. Obviously, there's a lot of talent, but guys aren't leaving Texas to come out to West Virginia, even with West Virginia in the Big 12. So they've stuck mostly or returned mostly to their main areas. I do recall speaking with one staffer who said, their goal for the most part, especially with the transfers nowadays. If they had done a study, or there was a study about players outside of 300 miles, I think it was, tend to transfer, X amount more
Right.
than those that were within 300 miles of campus. So West Virginia's tried to keep it in there, and that's going to include Pennsylvania, Ohio, Virginia, North Carolina, and that's the same areas they've always recruited. They'll jump out to New Jersey because New Jersey is, I mean, West Virginia, the university, not the football team. I feel like half of that school is from New Jersey.
Yeah.
And they venture down into South Florida too and have had success there. So they do go down there and spot recruit there as well.
Fair enough. And when you go 5-7, 6-6 every year, it's largely not because you win 6 games by 14 points and lose 6 games by 14 points. Generally speaking, there are 3 drives or something that come to define a game that you lose by 3, or 5 drives that, you lose by a touchdown and you're like, well, we went 3 and out these 3 drives and we didn't go for it on 4th and 2, or we didn't, we went for a field goal on, 4th and goal from the 2-yard line and, lose by 4, something like that. What is it about the in-game West Virginia experience right now, whether it's last year or the last couple of years, that you've seen, that fans seem to see, that say, this is the difference, right? If we are converting these 7 opportunities differently or approaching a game in this manner, we're going 8-4 more often than not, and now we end up at 5-7.
That was one heck of a way to get me to talk about that Pitt game again last year.
I didn't mean specifically that game, but also we can talk about the Kansas game. We can talk about the TCU game where West Virginia's in a position to win. What is there a common, thread, a through point with games like that right now?
I think now there was a almost like a flip switched for Neal Brown, and he got far more aggressive. And it started with that Pitt game and continued later on the year. For those who don't recall, WVU fans, close your ears. It was the Pitt game. West Virginia's up 7. They got 4th and about a foot on the 45 or something of Pitt side of the ball of midfield. You get that first down, game is over. If you don't get it, you still got to go 50-some yards to score a touchdown just to tie it. And instead, West Virginia kind of punted it away, and it just went downhill from there. They eventually blew the game. And that's something that's going to stick in the minds of a lot of WVU fans. And it seemed to stick with Neal Brown, too, because he got a little more aggressive as the year went on, a little more aggressive. And then more or less by the halfway point when it was, hey, if you don't win out, you're not going to bowl game. But they didn't go to the bowl game. But for the second half of the season, they got far more aggressive, and they found more success in doing that. So I think you might see that more, especially if they do this new offense that's going to be more read option, more run-centric, because they'll be put in more of those situations where it's, instead of pass 3 times and it's 4th and 10 and you're obviously punting, there's going to be a lot more of those 4th and 2, 4th and 1, 4th and 3 decisions that they're going to have to make. And I'm curious to see if Neal Brown stays as aggressive as he was toward the end of last year when it felt like he was just coaching for a job.
It seems to me from afar that it's a great time for a team who hasn't been winning 8 games a season to win 8 games a season within the Big 12, right? That you have a lot of change at quarterback, a lot of changes at head coach and offensive coordinator, whatever. How does West Virginia, in your mind, whether it's just the eye test guys getting off the bus or when you watch other Big 12 teams playing against each other, not even playing against West Virginia, does West Virginia stack up, right? When you watch Oklahoma State, Iowa State, when you watch Baylor, Kansas State, you're like, there's no reason West Virginia can't be beating these teams more often than not, or is there something lacking when you watch those other teams?
Right now, the thing that's lacking is explosive plays on offense. I mean, last year the defense struggled, but that was a lot due to injuries and transfers. That secondary kind of fell apart pretty quickly. But you look at this offense, and it's been all 4 years under Neal Brown. So, and it wasn't like that, obviously, with Dana in town. Granted, that final year of Dana Holgorsen might have spoiled some people with Will Grier throwing to Gary Jennings and David Sills and all that. But West Virginia, as an offense, does not get explosive plays. Even when you had JT Daniels at quarterback, Graham Harrell as offensive coordinator, they couldn't muster anything. That was the whole reason they brought those 2 in, was to try to get big plays on offense, and it hasn't happened. It feels like even when West Virginia scores over these last 4 years, it is a slog. It is a 12-play run, short pass, 5-yard touchdown run. Thank God you got in the end zone kind of thing. And when you watch those Ohio State players, when you watch Alabama, sure, they have those drives, but then there's a lot of 2 plays, 72 yards, and 60-yard touchdown pass. And West Virginia has not had that in years now.
You mentioned the defense. Consistently, this has been the strength of the team, at least since Neal Brown got there. He's done a good job on the defensive side. But as you mentioned, last year kind of bottomed out, injuries, transfers, the like. How confident are you that that was a blip on the radar, not something we will see as more of a developing trend from last year moving forward, or is it something that we should be concerned about?
I'd be slightly concerned about the secondary just because of personnel issues, but for the most part, and I was saying it during the season, and the coaches have picked it up this spring as well, is those guys didn't forget how to coach on that side of the ball.
Right.
The reason West Virginia was even made it to 500 more or less for those first couple years of Neal Brown's time was because of these defensive coaches, was because of the defense, and they did so in spite of some coaching turmoil. I don't know if you guys remember the Vic Koenig thing where he started out, got in some trouble, got the boot right before the start of the season, transfers, new starters, turnover, all that. And it didn't matter. They were a top 20, 25 defense the majority of the time. And then last year just fell off a cliff. I think a lot of that has to do with transfers. I mean, and also your all Big 12 cornerback, the guy who was supposed to help save your secondary, gets injured 12 snaps into the season opener. That's going to set you back as well. And you're kind of just chasing things down and just trying to tread water from there.
Final question, Chris, we'll get you out of here on this. We've used the word trust a lot in this conversation, confidence, et cetera, et cetera. Vegas doesn't have much in West Virginia. The over-under that we saw from DraftKings last week, 4.5. It is a tough schedule. There are some new teams coming into the Big 12, as Dan mentioned earlier. What is your level of trust as we go into 2023, given that 4.5 win total?
Last year, I did a preseason podcast, and I think West Virginia's win total was 5.
Yeah.
A flat 5. And I told everybody to bet the house on it. At worst, you're getting your money back.
Yeah.
They eked it out, and you got your money back. But 4.5, even lower. But you're right. It's just such a tough schedule, and it's going to start out so hard. Right, Penn State right off the bat. And there is a scenario here where you're looking at a West Virginia team that is like 1-3 to start the year. And I believe that lines up with when the bye week is, or maybe it's Houston and then it's bye week, whatever it is. But there's a situation here where it is 1-3, 1-4, and there's a discussion of, hey, this bye week, is it time to let Neal Brown go?
Yeah.
Which that's going to be tough because then you look at the second half of West Virginia's schedule, and there's some decent teams on there, but I don't think there's any game the rest of the year where you're like, yeah, West Virginia's going to be a double-digit underdog when they might be for a couple games in the first half. So 4.5, I'm not making any recommendations on that. I think for Neal Brown's future, it needs to certainly be over. But if I were a betting man, and I am, not a good one, but I am, I would watch more closely. Let them start if they start 1-3, then I'd see what that line is and try to bet the second half over whatever the win totals are at that time.
I think that's really smart. The home road splits are brutal for West Virginia this year. I feel bad for that. I feel bad for Neal Brown, given that there's already some coaching turmoil and that he's going to have to deal with the schedule. But we'll see. Hopefully it doesn't come to the bye week early firing situation. Chris, thank you so much for your time. Where can people find you?
You can find us at EerSports.com, and you can find me on Twitter at CMAnderson247.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time and wisdom. I know it's a busy day out there, so as we like to say on the show, stay solid.
All right. Thanks for having me on.
All right, there you go. Chris Anderson, EerSports.com. Check him out.
Yes.
Appreciate his time again on a very busy day. Very busy day in West Virginia. What are your thoughts on West Virginia?
I've been to West Virginia. I've been to a West Virginia game. I've been to Morgantown. I went to a completely boring daytime game, but in seeing West Virginia fans, hell, even in seeing Mizzou fans, rooting for places like that, right? That football is so important and it becomes such a frenzy when this team is good. And it's strange to watch actually all three of these teams, but specifically Mizzou and West Virginia struggle like they have. Because as a fan of wide open offenses and crazy athletes at receiver, both of these places, when operating, and I don't talk about, winning 11 games, whatever, however many games they win, you're talking about two of the more fun programs in college football. Yeah. Like, just the Tavon Austin, like just the number of guys that have come through Morgantown and Columbia, Missouri, Como, is pretty staggering. I know you've always got a soft spot in your heart for Henry Josie.
Oh,
so,
man.
like guys like that, you're just like, what's stopping these programs for having a very specific, wide open vision on offense? Once again, if you can find quarterbacks, which West Virginia struggled to do since Will Grier, but if you can find quarterbacks, this place is gonna be super fun. And so that's what's a bummer to me, that we're having these conversations about these programs returning to that 8-win level. So I'm West Virginia specific. They've been pretty awful to watch, which is so strange to say. Like, just in terms of a TV product. And Chris mentioned it, like explosive plays. Like, at the very least, figure out ways, because West Virginia, and it was far too quiet, but CJ Donaldson was one of the, at his best, dozen most exciting players in the country, healthy and at his best, and put in a position, right? He comes in as like a hybrid receiver H-back type, and they're like, he's too good as a freshman not to just give him the ball in the backfield. He was incredible. He gets hurt, and hopefully he bounces back to regain his form. But it's very odd to talk about a West Virginia team who is just trying to like paint the corners and like, we got to just win closer games and tackle a little bit better.
Tell me how you feel about this road-home split.
Oh my God. I remember looking at this, but continue.
If you are a West Virginia season ticket holder, the home games are only 6 home games. The 6 home games that you'll be able to see this year are Duquesne, the backyard brawl against Pitt, which is
great. No, that's a big deal.
It's a big deal. Texas Tech, Oklahoma State on homecoming.
Okay.
BYU and Cincinnati. Okay.
It's tough.
Would you like to hear the road games now?
Yeah.
Week 1, Saturday, 7:30 p.m. on the road at Penn State in Happy Valley. Possible whiteout game, week 1.
Does Penn State have anybody week 2? Look ahead? Something? Maybe? Probably not.
Penn State week 2 has the Fight in Delaware Blue Hens.
Yeah, there you go.
So the answer is no. Then, a couple weeks later, end of September, at TCU. After a bye week, at Houston. 2 weeks later, at UCF. 2 weeks later, at Oklahoma. They close out the year on the road at Baylor. It is decidedly way harder on the road than it is at home for West Virginia.
Yeah.
Over under, again, is 4.5.
Yeah.
Which I think is low. I think that's a little bit low, but I get it. This is a really tough slate.
Are you going to look in the same way that you did with Texas Tech last year for like the gumpy Big 12 team? And look,
I always do. I always do.
Last season, everybody played everybody. It's a different kind of scheduling tactic now, that it just seemed like that it was banger after banger after banger in the Big 12 of competent teams. But I wonder if West Virginia might sneak up on people just because they're like weirdly placed on team schedules. Maybe. They feel like
I don't know.
I hope Garrett Green is good if he ends up starting a quarterback. I hope he's good. He seemed decent when he didn't throw the ball away in the last couple games, beat Oklahoma.
Look, that requires some degree of competence on offense and figuring out exactly how Chad Scott is going to put this thing together. I hope he leans a little bit more heavily into the running game. I think that's their strength. I don't think they need to reinvent the wheel on that front, but we see that happen year in and year out. We'll find out what he's got in store. If he leans into that, I feel much better about West Virginia's chances of at least getting to a bowl game, hitting that over. 8 wins feels like a stretch.
Yeah.
If they get 8 wins off of this schedule, they should give Neal Brown a contract extension. They probably will, because this is a tough slate.
Look,
given where they're at.
If they can build the whole plane out of CJ Donaldson and the way that they built the whole plane out of David Sills in the end zone like 3 years ago, 5 years ago, I lose track of time, Ty. They could be fun. They could be fun. I'm not writing them off yet. I'm in wait and see mode despite that schedule. West Virginia upsetting Penn State and Drew Aller week 1. Oh, Ty. What it would do to your heart.
That would kill me.
That's it.
That would really kill me.
Yeah.
All right. Write in. Let us know at solidverbal@gmail.com your thoughts on all of these teams. We post episodes out to YouTube. So if you're watching out there, you can comment below. Let us know your thoughts on what we got right, what we got wrong, where we're way off, where we're spot on. We'd love to hear it. Love to get your feedback. We know we don't know everything about these teams, but this is trying to just give you the broad stroke of what we see from our I don't know, perch up here as a National College Football Podcast.
Yeah, and if you own a restaurant, bar, or bakery, do you still have the P.O. box to replace this Easy Tiger hat that you constantly wear if you're watching this on YouTube? Send Ty some restaurant hats. If
you email us, solvable@gmail.com, I could tell you how to send stuff.
Okay.
I'll be selective, I promise. But I do need to figure out. I love this hat. This hat's
a great hat.
A family heirloom at this point.
What's your preferred style? You like the trucker badgy?
I do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's me.
Okay.
I'm not a big dad hat guy.
You looking to get into the string, not the string, the rope hat?
I could go a nice rope hat. I don't have any currently.
If you own a golf club, if you're a head pro, if you're a tennis, whatever. If you coach a high school baseball team, I'll consider it.
I will.
That's all.
All right. For ballers.com, that's the Patreon. Go and check it out.
Yes.
Again, quick slants at solidverbal.com. We'll talk more about win totals in the newsletter, which drops a little bit later today. And many people listen to this on Thursday.
Love it.
Check it out. For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein. For myself, Ty Hildenbrand, thanks for downloading, listening, supporting the show. We'll talk to you all soon. Stay solid.
Peace.